Welcome back to the podcast of Wednesday's Child. We thought for this episode we'd pick something really quite timely because in the next few weeks, undoubtedly, there will be an awful lot of people either heading off to university for the first time or returning to their studies. And for some people, that could be quite a challenge, particularly if somebody's already been through a journey with an eating disorder. Somebody might feel vulnerable to issues around an eating disorder. And for families and friends, it throws up lots of issues about should somebody return to university if they've already been poorly, or should somebody be thinking about going at all if during perhaps their high school years they've found it really, really difficult to control their relationship perhaps with food and with exercise. So for this episode, we're going to dive into that topic just in time for the return to the university term time. And to do so, I am joined by the wonderful Rachel, who really can give us a bird's eye view as to what it feels like, as can I to some extent, because as many of you will know, and we discussed in the last episode, that it was actually while at university that I succumbed to an eating disorder. So Rachel's going to share a lot about her journey. So hi, Rach. Thanks for being on the episode with us. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yeah, I'm doing good.
Excellent. So we're going to do a bit of reflection and we're not going to get all emotional about it, are we? But we're going to use this, I think, really to just give people some thinking space, things to consider if they are heading off to university. So take me back a little bit to where you were. How were you in your relationship with yourself, your body, eating relationship before university became part of the picture?
If I'm honest, looking back at it now, I don't think I ever really had like a good relationship, especially when I started university. I had spent uh, probably a good few years doing high like competitive dance and things like that. But I was relatively unaware of the fact that I actually had a bad relationship with kind of food and exercise and definitely body image. So it kind of came a bit unaware because I went in thinking that it was going to be going away from home was going to be the fix and it was all going to be fine, and it just didn't turn out that way.
Sounds so familiar. I can remember feeling, that was going to be my perfect new fairy tale world to go to university. And equally, I suppose I would share that perhaps quite ignorant to how worried I was about my body and myself and my behaviors. So how quickly did it start to manifest that it was a problem for you? And can you kind of pinpoint that to particular actions or thoughts or things someone said, or was it about routines and just the fact of having to decide to cook for yourself?
Yeah, I think it was a lot more about kind of routines, and it wasn't that I had to be up at a certain time and have breakfast at the same time and things like that. That I've always had kind of like been quite rigid with them things, and that was either because I needed to get to school or straight after school I was be going to dance or work, and there was always kind of a pattern to what I was doing. Uh, and then going forward, actually, it turned out that to everyone else, even within the first couple of weeks, they could see that actually maybe I didn't eat the same as everyone else, and I wouldn't eat in the kind of the kitchen area. I would go to my room. So I'd cook something, go to my room, and I would never eat in front of any of them, and it would be at different times to them. So I'd wait until people weren't in the kitchen or anything like that. And to me, it was normal. I didn't know that actually was a bit of a red flag.
Right. So when did you start to become cognizant that actually, hold on, this is an issue, Rach, this isn't normal. I'm the only one taking my food off to my room.
If I'm honest, it was the end of first year. I had probably gone most of first year with these kind of, I'd say maybe a little bit like quirks to what I was doing.
Okay.
And I think to most people, that's the time that people learn how to cook, and maybe they're not eating kind of what their parents would have been making them. So it wasn't a massive issue until maybe I was more stressed with the amount of work I had. I'm quite a perfectionist, so I was starting to kind of internalize everything, and that was when actually I realized that there was more of an issue than I maybe first thought, and I think that was where kind of restriction came in, and exercise. But I almost went a full year without it being kind of detected by myself.
So detected by yourself, but also I suppose if you were, at least for the most part, away from family and friends, the very people that were around you and seeing you all the time were people that were less used to Rachel. They didn't know what Rachel's patterns behaviors were. Do you think there was an element that I think can be dangerous in university when we make new friendships? We're not close enough to those people for them to say, to call you out on things. It's not like we've spent the last 10 years at school with them, so they can call you out and say, Rach, that's not you, stop it. Don't do that. It's different, isn't it, when you're trying to develop new relationships with people at university?
Yeah, I definitely think so because I'm quite an outgoing person, and to them, actually, I was quite a shy person, and I think it was because I'd gone away from kind of all of my friends, all of my family, and that's good to kind of push my boundaries. But I think in that circumstance that they maybe weren't my best friends, they weren't the people who I would talk to every day, and I was put with a group of people who ordinarily I don't think I would have been friends with. So past kind of odd passings in the corridor, it it wasn't like these people were ever really going to get to know me that well.
Yeah. So no true emotional connection with anything, which perhaps speaks to the fact of sometimes that's where an eating disorder has the gap to come in because we're missing some kind of emotional food and love and nurture, and that sabotaging of the eating disorder voice has space to breed inside us.
Yeah, definitely. I think because they weren't the people who I had that connection with, the people who actually I did have a deeper connection with and became my very close friends, they weren't there when actually um I was eating or making meals. Most of the time, they were the ones who were going to lectures with me or going out to an event. Most of the things that kind of were an issue, especially at that point, they weren't there for. They weren't seeing.
Right. So when did it become a problem? When did somebody have to step in? Was it to do with you perhaps going home and seeing family? Was that because often sometimes someone goes home for Christmas and family become really aware? Was it that, or was it somebody else on campus, medically wise, or in welfare? What was it that said, hold on, we've got an issue here?
It was actually one of my friends from placement who, like I say, I, we moved away together into kind of placement accommodation, and at that point, I was spending all of my time with her.
Right.
So we were going to placement together, and we were then sharing a flat for I think it was 6 weeks. At that point, she was like, as she said, that there's something isn't right here, and I think I was then spending more time exercising, less time talking to her, and she would actually see what I was cooking.
Right.
And I think then that started to ring alarm bells. But from the family side of it, I wasn't ringing them regularly. I wasn't talking to them. They were noticing a change in my behaviour before they noticed anything physically.
Okay. So you were retreating a little bit more into yourself, perhaps?
Yeah, I think I, in now thinking about it now, I knew that somebody was going to say something. Someone would notice the change that I was more snappy, and I didn't want to have a conversation with people. It just took up too much energy. So I didn't call home. I didn't check in with my sister. And I think they noticed that at first or anything else.
Yeah. And when did it become so serious that somebody had to step in and do something?
I think it became it became quite serious before anyone did step in, or at least anyone who could do anything. So it was at the end of first year that, especially that friend was saying, there's something the matter. Like, can someone talk to her? Like, I don't know what's going on.
So your friend,
Um,
hold on, your friend was sort of reaching out and wanting somebody to help her help you almost. There was almost that sort of, I don't know myself enough what to do, so I need somebody else to help. And I think there's a really good takeaway from that. So if anybody's listening to this and finds themselves in the next few weeks and months with a flatmate or something, it is really difficult, isn't it? I mean, let's face it, to talk to somebody who's going through an eating disorder and expect a decent conversation with the snappiest person on the planet who is starving themselves, is in a really bad place, and you think you're going to have a rational conversation, well, good luck to that. So I can see why your friend said, I'm really alarmed, I'm really worried, but I need to bring in someone else here. So I can see why that was her thinking.
yeah, and I feel really sorry for her now. If For the fact that she actually stuck around and she said, no, actually, this isn't her. This isn't who the person I've known for a year. Um, and actually, she just kept saying, like, somebody, like, what's going on? There's something going on. And unfortunately, it was missed for a while. Until I went away over the summer break, and then my family started noticing more things. But I think again, to them it was, oh well, she's more interested in going running than say I did a lot of dance, so they were used to me doing a lot of activity. So she wants to go running or anything like that, or
So they just thought you
I,
found a different activity to focus on.
yeah, I think they were worried that it was the wrong thing, and I was trying to do the wrong thing. But I think to a point, like, I was an adult, they didn't want to be saying, well, you can and can't be doing this.
Yeah.
But I know after having conversations with my mum now, she said sending well me going back for that second year, she was concerned, and I think the start of that second year was definitely when it spiraled massively for me. I think the first year it was an issue, but second year was where it really began for me. Um, I think I'd put a lot more stress on me, and it seemed just to get worse from there.
And by all accounts, you stuck it out. You tried to carry on, and it didn't end well, did it?
No, I got through probably half of the second year, and then ended up in hospital and spending quite a lot of what is valuable lecture time in hospital and going back and forth to appointments um, with the GP, because actually I was really struggling to get any other kind of help anyway, um, because of like criterias and things like that in the area. So I was quite ill before I could even try and access help. So I think it was quite a difficult time because I just wanted to continue. I didn't think there was anything the matter. But now I see that actually I could have ended up just not being able to finish my degree at all. I didn't give myself a chance to even try and get better.
Mm.
It was just that focus constantly.
Like you said before, that perfectionist trait in you wanting to just, oh, I'll get this done, I'll complete this, I'll achieve this, rather than focusing on, actually, I've got a terrifying illness here and I really need to face up to it and tackle it. So,
Yeah.
can you recall how able you felt to actually reach out to the university themselves, or did you feel it had to be explored external to that via sort of other kind of healthcare services? Was there any level of shame or whatever, or was it just about resource that you didn't think you could just get help internally?
No, it was the same friend who obviously was a very big part of my kind of university journey. She really didn't give me a choice whether to tell the university.
We all need one of them. We all need a friend like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So it was I'm going, you can either come with me and explain what's going on, or but there really wasn't an option. So I didn't want somebody talking about me and what was going on if I wasn't there. So that was my option. But that was probably the first couple of weeks of second year, and whether it was through not understanding or not wanting to admit that there was an issue, there wasn't a lot of help that I could access within university. I think they just kind of wanted me to just continue. And if I'm honest, it wasn't the right thing for me, and it wasn't the right thing for even, I mean, I was in a healthcare degree, so I was having to go to placements. It wasn't, I don't, at this point now, I realise it probably wasn't the best thing for me to be doing that at all. And I was getting physically very ill. So it just wasn't, it got to a point where I couldn't, like my body wouldn't let me before actually the university stepped in and said, yeah, we're going to have to do something about this. So I kind of wish there was more support for me, but at that time there wasn't.
You'd like to think, I mean, we're a few years on from that, you'd like to think perhaps universities have learned more, and maybe they're not so fixated on only identifying issues around, I don't know, what somebody's weight is or how somebody looks or how severely unwell someone seems to be. I don't know whether that's true at every university around the country, but I'd like to think there's a bit of improvement there.
Yeah, I think since I was quite close with one of my lecturers, and since then I know she's worked hard to actually educate herself on it all, because it wasn't
Right.
anything that she ever thought that she would have to be thinking about, especially with all of the students that she'd been looking after. And I think now they're realizing that the mental health of the students is probably just as important as their students academically. And I know that especially that group of lecturers have spent a long time kind of going through mental health first aiders and doing different courses to actually make sure that they're equipped for anything that kind of the cohort brings to them.
Yeah.
So I know that things have changed from that front, especially in the degree that I was doing. I think they've worked hard to do it.
That's really good to hear. So, what would you say now to somebody that was in your position then and didn't feel they were being heard, or, felt like they were having to try, it was too difficult to try and get the kind of help you needed? Or is it, I mean, you'd be honest with me, is it, even looking back, I mean, cognitively, you wouldn't have been in a great place at that point.
Mm.
Arguably, perhaps you wouldn't have been able to, even if you'd known what it said on paper you should do. Would you have found that too difficult to pursue a particular route?
Yeah, I think I was very lucky to find like a support network. So I was very lucky to find people who actually helped me. So it wasn't, even in the times when I cognitively I wasn't there. There were people who I knew were going to be fighting my corner if somebody said, "Well, you don't meet a criteria, we can't help you." Well, I knew that that person was then going to say, "Well, no, you are going to help." and friends who actually, I guess, cut me a bit of slack to know that actually this wasn't how I normally would be, and they were going to be there, whatever, and actually came to some of my doctor's appointments when I just didn't want to go.
That's amazing. Wow. So people that can kind of advocate for you, but support you through and be that kind of, cheerleader when you most need it.
Yeah, and even, I mean, even though I did move quite far away from my family, and now I think back at it, I was horrible to them. Like, I feel so sorry for them, but they were there. Like, when I did call them, they were there, and yeah, now I know that I put them through a lot of stress. But actually, if I had called them and said, I need you to come down, they would just been there at any point. They would have driven the 5 hours and came and seen me. So I
How
think
do you
having that
feel
there,
about universities having the right to contact? Because there's always the argument, isn't there, that when you go to university, if you're over 18, strictly speaking, the university don't need to tell your parents or other kind of family members about your mental health and well-being. How do you feel about that? And would you have railed against it had the university have said to you at that time, particularly given you'd moved so far away, that they wanted to have your mum in particular involved in that care pathway? How would you have felt about that?
I would have been, they would have lost my trust. They
Right.
really would have. And that may have been because I was ill and I couldn't think straight. But
Yeah.
actually, they would have lost my trust at that point because I had made that decision. I was doing it on my own. And if I'm honest, I think if I had gone home when maybe it all started, I probably wouldn't be in such, like, I wouldn't be the same person I am today, because then I would have relied on somebody else.
Yeah.
So I am glad that actually it was left up to me, because that's then made me more resilient to know that actually I've done this myself. I haven't had somebody holding my hand all the time. But in the same sense, actually, I do think there is a space for family members to know what's going on, especially if it gets to the point where they are drastically ill. I mean, I'm not proud of saying this, but I spent 4 weeks in hospital, and my family didn't know that I was in hospital.
No one had to legally tell them.
No, nobody had to tell them, and it was only when I decided that I'd had enough, and actually the nurse at my GP surgery kind of talked me into telling them, that I actually told them that at that moment I was in hospital, quite ill.
Wow.
And that can only be, well, I know it is, I know it's really hard for my family to, I think they lost a bit of trust with me, because uh, I should have told them. So I think at that moment they probably, like, somebody should have told them. I obviously wasn't in the right headspace. So
It speaks of how ill you were, that those were the decisions you were making at the time. You felt it was
yeah,
better to keep it as your secret than to reach
yeah,
out to the very people that knew you most, knew you better than anybody.
yeah,
You ultimately, you lost, if you like, effectively the majority of that second year of university, but
yeah,
you did resume your studies and then stormed through your degree, and you've moved on and have made an amazing start to your healthcare career. What are the kind of biggest things that you look back on and say to somebody else, do this, don't do this, I would never have this? Are there any things that you just think, if you were in the shoes of somebody now going to university, what would you most want to stress to them?
make sure that you're making these decisions for you. I mean, at the start, when I first went to university, I wasn't doing it because I wanted do it. I was doing it to make other people happy. And I've realized that relatively recently. But also, if you have got yourself into a situation where you're struggling, it's not a bad thing to admit it, because I think you'll find that there'll be hundreds of other people who are also having a bad time and actually need to talk to someone. You're not actually as alone as you think you are. Also, if you get yourself into a situation where maybe you've got to that stage where you are very physically ill, or even if you haven't, you've just got, you know that you're not doing well, and you think, I've got to keep going, I've got to keep going. University is going to be there next year, and you're not failing yourself. If anything, you're listening to yourself. I spent so long not listening to actually what I needed, that I was just constantly going because it would make other people happy. That actually now I look back and I think I should have just taken the time to listen to what I wanted and to understand what was going to make me better and make me the person who I wanted to be.
And is that the big shift for you now? Like when we look at Rachel today, are you living for Rachel? You're learning to trust who Rachel is and how Rachel feels.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the part of the journey that I'm at right now. And I think it's going to be ever changing, but I'm not in the space where I'm struggling with kind of exercise and food as much. I think that learning to listen to myself and learning to kind of value my own opinion, that's what I'm working on now. And actually, I have seen more of a change in myself since I've started working on them things than maybe I did in the past kind of like 2 years plus doing all of the other stuff. Because actually, that was just the base. But this is what, say, building the house, like this is the roof, like this is the thing that's going to keep me going. And the fact of that, actually, I know what I want, and I'm not trying to make other people happy. If I'm in a job I don't want to do, then I know that I can just say, well, I'll go and find something else. I'll go and find something that I enjoy, that makes me happy, that gives me a purpose.
That's amazing. I feel almost a bit shivery hearing you speak about that, because one thing I haven't said on the episode so far is I got to know you a couple of years ago now, but I've been the kind of befriender kicking you up the backside at different
Yeah.
stages over the last few years, haven't I? To put it mildly. And your progress journey has just been phenomenal. And yeah, just sitting back and just taking those words in and hearing where you're at now, I feel absolutely in awe of you. I think it's amazing, and you should be so proud of yourself.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much for joining the episode today, Rach. It's been really, really lovely to hear your insight about going to university, what you've been through, and how far you've come. And I really hope that somebody out there will take those words as real comfort and just a reminder that it's, the thing that I will take away most from this episode is that you say about listening to yourself. And I think, if we all did that, whatever state of health, if we all learned to do that a little bit more, rather than this external validation by what does he, she, or other person that we've never even met think about us, so much the better. Thank you so much for listening to the latest episode of Wednesday's Child podcast. We will be back again really soon. If you want to comment about this episode, about Rachel's incredible courage and her kind of candid nature of sharing the story so eloquently as she did, then please feel free to drop me an email. You can reach out to me at debbie@wednesdayschild.co.uk. As I say, we'll be back with another episode really very soon. But for now, stay focused on recovery.